I was listening to someone on a video talking sometime last week that the area in Israel known in biblical times, once the Israelites took over as the land of Israel, was actually a very strategic place. And once I heard them, I understood that we have been tricked once again as black people, being told that we are Hebrew Israelites, because the Torah that I am now investigating and also showing to be not of God, but I told you many videos ago that a man wrote this who did not hear from God, meaning that the God of Israel in the book is fake. Because I started out dealing with the New Testament is fake, now I'm exposing the Torah itself as well as being something not quote-unquote God-inspired but man-inspired. And I was showing that the trick in the book, or a part of the trick, is to tell you that you're going to lose your identity. And so now when you find out that you are a so-called Israelite because people are telling you that, then you feel, yeah, we were tricked. They stole our identity over there in the Middle East. And now you've got a Jewish nation over there. But the trick, the main trick, it seems to me, is not about your identity in regards to the land, but the trick is a money trick. Because it seems like in ancient times, that land over there, the land of Israel, which was a part of Africa and still is, although they make it look different on political maps, was a major business/trade route. And so from ancient times, anyone who controlled that land mass right there, a lot of people from different nations doing business had to go through that land. They had to encounter that land, that passageway, to go into different lands to do business. So anybody who owns that land is set to make a ton load of money. I feel that the main trick is not your identity, that your identity was lost as Israelites, so now you're finding it out again, but that the land will make a ton load of money for whoever controls it. My title here for this lesson is One Book to Fool Them All. Now I'm going to read, I got 3 scriptures to read for you here as I continue my newfound set of lessons and focus on exposing the Torah according to what I found recently by just studying the scriptures a little bit more intently. Deuteronomy chapter 4 verse 5 to 8. Hear what it's saying. And I'm reading this with the whole thought in mind that the God of Israel says that Israel should be different from the Egyptians. Don't do as the Egyptians. You should be separate and you're a set apart nation and so on. Now Deuteronomy 4 verse 5 to 8. Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments. So this is Moses telling them now. Even as the Lord my God commanded me, that ye should do so in the land whither ye go to possess it. And lately I've been wondering if they wrote all this stuff from the knowledge of what they found in Egypt. When they went in, the Greeks went in and took over Egypt a long time ago. So they can write this strong spiritual story. Because remember, the Egyptians were very, very spiritual people, right? And we know they burnt a lot of books way back then, but they saved a lot. So they can have all this spiritual background to write all this very classy and very, it's just like a well put together trick book. So verse 6 goes on to say, keep therefore and do them. For this is your wisdom, so do these statutes and ordinances and so on. For this is your wisdom and understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. I'll pause the reading right there. Since we know, as I've pointed out in my last few lessons that I uploaded, that the children of Israel knew very well the lifestyle and customs and rituals of the Egyptians and would come out through the Exodus to go and do similar kind of stuff, why is it that the God of Israel is here speaking through Moses and saying that the children of Israel, if they do these things, these rituals and ordinances and so on, will look like a wise and great understanding people, making them look different in that kind of way to the other nations of the earth, and certainly different from the Egyptians, when the Egyptians were doing the same kind of stuff? Because I pointed out in recent videos that even with the sacrificial system, the Egyptians and other nations were doing it before the children of Israel became a nation and came out of Egypt. They were doing these sacrifices before. They had these statutes and these ordinances that they lived by themselves, these rituals. So when Israel began to do these same kind of sacrifices and rituals and washing and cleansing and so on, and temple kind of behavior and temple use, and I got a couple more temple videos left. I think I uploaded one. I got another one to upload today, and I got a couple more temple videos coming. Already recorded, just need to be edited. Right? So the children of Israel were doing this kind of stuff, just like the Egyptians and other nations were doing in all over Mesopotamia. The Babylonians were doing it. Everybody else was doing it pretty much. Chaldeans, like all these different, like the Canaanite nations, they were doing all this kind of stuff, animal sacrifices, and had their temples and so on. You have the whole Baal culture with as many sacrifices and temples. So Israel comes out of Egypt, and the God of Israel is speaking through Moses saying, if you do all these things, you are going to be different to me, and you're going to be a wise and understanding and great nation in the sight of all the other people on the earth. If you do these things, that we find that Egypt and all these other nations were already doing these kinds of things. The only difference is that Israel just made slight or minor changes. So, like I pointed out before, like if a nation, whether it's Egypt or Babylonians or whoever, had a certain kind of priestly garment, then Israel came out and they just wore like one other piece of garment that was slightly different made, and another nation someplace on the other side of the earth would just make a slightly different garment as well. And so Israel, by changing the garment, will look different, but they are still priests doing animal temple sacrifices. All they had to do to look different was to just change their garment, for example. But the truth is, as I've pointed out before, all the different nations made the changes to their garments as well. Like somebody in a colder climate, a different part of the earth was cold, might have to wear one or two extra pieces of garment. So they're going to dress the priest different for warmth, for example. And Israel doesn't have all that extra garment, probably. And probably sew their clothes different. But it's still the same priestly culture all over the earth. So why is Israel different with their garment when other nations had to make their garments different from the Egyptians? Why? Everybody else is changing the garments to reflect their culture and where they're at, and the temperature or climate where they're at. So if they're already changing their garments, it's no different from Israel changing their garments too to look different from the Egyptians. But they're doing the same things. So how can Israel be seen as being different to the other nations when they're doing the same things that the Egyptians and the other nations are doing? It does not make sense. So let's go on reading verse 7. For what nation is there so great, who hath God so nigh unto them, as the Lord our God is in all things that we call upon him for. And what nation is there so great that hath statutes and judgments so righteous as all this law which I set before you this day? These laws, other nations had them, but like I've been pointing out slowly in my videos recently, Israel just made up itself, and so many people way before me have shown that a lot of these laws were already in Egypt and already on the earth for other nations to be doing them, but they had them in their own little way with their own slight changes, but they're essentially the same kind of laws. But Israel just tacked on maybe certain things that are specific to them, but it's still the same basic core set of laws on earth that people should be living by. So when he's saying so great a set of laws and so on, and so different, so unique, it is not that unique. It is just the Israelite version of the same laws on earth that all nations are using. Like the Egyptians had the Egyptian versions, the Mayans had the Mayan version, the Aztec had the Aztec versions, right? Everybody had their versions of the laws. The Olmecs, everybody. When you find that a lot of these people really were the same groups of people, they just chop them up and call them by different names over the earth. So there is no uniqueness right there with Israel. That does not allow other nations to be unique as well when they made their slight changes. Now, Leviticus chapter 18, verse 1 to 4. Let's read that one. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, I am the Lord your God. So he's speaking now. He's going to give some strong stuff that's going to show how unique Israel is. And we're going to really see if it is unique, because I'm going to tear it down and show this God in the Torah is not unique. We only believed it, and I believed it all my life, especially coming into the Hebrew Israelite understanding, that it was unique what Israel was doing, because you are taught. And religious stuff is such that when it is taught, you accept it by faith. And you just instinctively rush to believe it in your heart. Because that's how religious teaching is. That's how religious information comes to you. The moment you tack on a religious kind of aura to what you're saying, people shift over instinctively to having faith, to having trust in what is being taught. Usually that's how people approach it. But if you sound like you're talking about politics or medicine or so, people don't shift in their mind, like in their spirit, in the internal part of them, to thinking religious things and having faith, attaching faith to what is being said. Why? Because you're talking about medicine, you're talking about biology, and so on. But if you sound like you're talking something religious, a part of us just shifts into religious mode. And we shift into faith gear. And so it becomes easy by the time the people stop teaching for you to believe it, that this is from God. But it's just the same kind of trick that the other nations were doing to tell their people to worship God. No God should be telling you to worship them. No prophet is needed for a God to tell. If a God has a message to you, he does not need a Moses or another prophet, a Micah, Elijah or so to come and tell you that word. Especially when the God of Israel knows that there is so much deception on earth, that even the perfect so-called man Adam can fall in the garden with Eve when there was already no supposed sin on earth. If you are perfect as Adam and Eve in Eden, and as one temptation from the so-called serpent can take you down in a perfect setting, how much easier it is for you to be deceived when sin is already rampant in the earth. Yet this God shows himself in the same kind of way where other religions are acting, doing the same kind of temple systems and the same kind of sacrificial systems and so on. And in some cases, the same kinds of writings as you find in Egyptian and Sumerian writings. He doesn't show himself different enough. and sending prophets, like other religions and so on have their own prophets and their own masters and so on, teaching them. He is not that different. What he could have done different to show that this is unique is, instead of sending a man to tell you, like a guru will teach or a prophet will teach, he would have done different to show that this is different. By doing what? By telling you himself directly. Every Israelite should have been told by the God of Israel exactly what he wants them to do. No more of this man telling man what God wants. In fact, the Torah itself in Jeremiah chapter 31 to 34, Jeremiah chapter 31 verse 31 to 34, is telling you that in the end, when the earth is restored and gets to a better place, or when Israel is restored, that there will no longer be any man teaching his neighbor. So you're not going to teach the next man beside, because the truth is going to be in your heart. That means you're not going to need a prophet to teach you. That means the real focus and point of the Torah is to get you, the Israelite, to a place where a man does not teach you. So you will not need the word of Moses. You will not need the word of Elijah or anybody else, because you are going to have the word of the Most High in your heart. That is the end goal, that you know inside your heart how to live on the earth. So what the God of Israel should have done then is to show an inkling of that from way back then, to show how unique he is. That how he starts out with no man telling you is how he's going to end, like in Jeremiah 31 verse 34, that nobody is going to need to teach you. He should not have sent Moses from a mountaintop to come and tell Israel what to do with 613 commandments. He should have shown up to every single Israelite himself, to show how different a God he is, so that when he says don't do as the Egyptians, you can know this God is real, and he's really different. Because if he appears to you on his own, there's no middleman in between, so nobody can deceive you. Because you know for yourself, the God of Israel appeared unto me and told me himself. I don't care which book you come with, he told me this himself. He said, don't do it. So when you're telling me that God said in the Torah to do this law and to do that, you can say no, because he appeared to me directly and told me himself, don't do that. But instead, when a man comes with 613 and said, do this, do that, you're going to do it because you know he's the only man who has the authority on what God said. God has failed the children of Israel in sending a man in between to act as an interface between you and your God. The world is past the stage now where we need other men speaking for God. The world is at the place with all kinds of trickery and corruptions and many, many books and many scrolls and many whatever, that even people who don't go to church or don't study the Bible are saying these things are fake. The Dead Sea Scrolls are fake. They're fake. And I found that the Dead Sea Scrolls are fake myself from the New Testament is Fake series. Before I even studied it out, I looked at certain things that I knew already from Roman history, and I told you in the New Testament is Fake series that the Dead Sea Scrolls are fake. So the world is past the stage where a man is going to come to you from God. The earth can't take that anymore. With all this nuclear stuff coming up in the news all the time, and people are scared of nuclear bombs and whatever, and you're still going to wait on another man to come with a message from God, and a man who came thousands of years ago still leaves the earth destitute like this of any truth in it? How can there be truth dropped at Sinai and earth can't find the truth thousands of years later? There is no truth on earth through these prophets. Every God, whether he is some Baal type God or some Egyptian type God or some Mesopotamian God, some Chaldean God, every God who wants to communicate his truth should speak to people directly, and not to one single man, one single prophet to come and tell you anything. You must speak to people directly if you are a God, and stop sending a man to come and tell you what the God said. Because people are sick of the prophets. They are sick of the teachers, the religious teachers. Earth is sick of it. Earth is sick. So a God like the God of Israel, sending a prophet like Moses to last thousands of years with his message, had no far-reaching sight into the future to understand that that message will not have weight in 2018 because of the couple thousand years people are going to get sick of it and find no value in the message of Moses, because the way that earth is going and the way the wars are going and the way everything is going and the economy is going and all kinds of stuff and land theft is going and the stealing of indigenous lands and so on, all of that stuff is proving to people in their heart that no truth ever dropped on earth from this God of Israel or any God. Because if the truth came from the God of Israel, earth would have found the truth. Because he said himself, my word will not return unto me void, but it will accomplish that which I set it out to do. And he sent his word into the hearts of the children of Israel through Moses coming down from Sinai. And the word did not accomplish the purity and the set apartness of the children of Israel. They were so not set apart that when Moses came down with the very word from the same mountain, they couldn't even go a year. When he came down from the same mountain with the tablets, he broke up the tablets out of anger because the people were not set apart. This God, his word came back to him void because Moses had to break up the same word on the tablets and stone the altar with the bull on it, because the word of the Most High became void when he came down and saw what the children of Israel were doing. God just made all kinds of miracles to bring you out of Egyptian bondage, splitting Red Sea waters and so on, and destroying Pharaoh's army. And just in a minute, you're worshiping idols and making a bull god? Can't you see that the word dropped at Sinai was void? When he told Moses, look, go deliver the children of Israel and bring them to worship me on this mountain, that was void. Because what did Moses come down from the mountain and see them doing? Worship a bull god, Yahweh. So the Most High's word returned unto him void. There is no substance to it. There's no longevity to it. Because he himself said, from the day I brought you out of Egypt, you transgressed against me. You were worshiping idols. You were sinning against me. And that it also says, it is not to me you offer those sacrifices for 40 years in the wilderness, O Israel, but unto your God Molech to Chemosh, which means the word of the Most High that you should choose me only and I'm the Lord your God, was void right away. In the same wilderness he brought them into, the first part of ground he brought them to, the word of the Most High became void, returned unto him void, because right away they began to worship other gods. And still to this day in 2018, you are reaching other people telling them about a 12-tribe chart. If you're from Haiti, you're this. If you're from Jamaica, you're this tribe. And if you're from here, you're from that tribe. And if you're from here, you're Judah, and so on. Why? Because the word of the God of Israel did not accomplish what it set out to do. And so the people are still trying to find ways to try to trick us, to tell us we're from this tribe and that tribe, because the word was so void that today people are still trying to work to get the people to fall in line into tribes and to become Israelites in their heart, an Israelite identity they should take on, in order to try to prove the word of the Most High correct, because the word became void a long time ago. The word returned unto him void because it could not accomplish the bringing out of a nation that was set apart and that was different from Egypt and different from other nations. It could not accomplish the changing of the hearts and the minds and the rituals of these people, so that when they came out of Egypt, they were still living and acting like Egyptians by doing these sacrifices and so on, and keeping similar laws as we found in Egypt. The word could not accomplish the set apartness and uniqueness of the children of Israel. In fact, they were so same as the Egyptians that they were still in Egyptian territory when they made that sacrifice while Moses was on top of the mountain. So it goes on here from verse 2. After the doings of the land of Egypt, wherein ye dwelt, shall ye not do after the doings of the land of Canaan. But weren't they known in Egypt to worship bull gods and offer these bulls as sacrifices? They specialize in that in Egypt. So you see the word return void? Because he told them, you will not do this, but they were doing it while Moses was up on the mountain. They couldn't even wait until they settled into their promised land. As soon as the Egyptian army died off, according to the story, they were there making. Aaron said, take off the earrings, your gold and so on, give them to me, let's make a god. And he told them, this is your God that brought you out of the land of Egypt. And the people's minds were so destroyed that they didn't even have the guts from the religious deception that still operates today, when you can't say to your pastor or your camp Hebrew Israelite leader, that don't make sense. Because they should have told Aaron, if their mind was not destroyed, how can this be the God that brought us out of Egypt when you're just making it right here with the jewelry that we just took off from our ears and around our neck and off our hands and so on? This cannot be the God that just brought us out. But their minds were destroyed. So they just believed it. But it's a big fake. It's a big trick. It's just one book to fool them all. So it says, shall ye not do after the doings of the land of Canaan? So he says, shall ye not do, and after shall ye not do after the doings of the land of Canaan? Whither I bring you, shall ye not do, neither shall ye walk in their ordinances. But we know the Egyptians and many other ancient nations had the same type of bull ordinances, sacrificial ordinances and rituals and sacrificial system. The same goat that Israel is going to send as a scapegoat to carry away your sins into the wilderness or out of the city gate to carry away your sins. Other nations were doing the same thing with the goat Azazel, which is Satan. But Israel is doing that, and you're telling me they have a different kind of system, they have a different law that makes them wise above all other nations, when other nations are doing this kind of stuff? One book, people, to fool them all. Like they say, one book to rule them all. You see that? That's why they added on the New Testament at the end. They can't just bear for you just to have the Torah alone, because they got to add on all as like a seamless kind of work. And I told you already, but I'm working on it some more, that instead of what I thought originally in the New Testament, this fake series, that the Old Testament was there and then the New Testament was written by somebody like Marcion and others, putting together to try to look at the Old Testament and to make up a fake New Testament to trick us. So then that would mean that the Torah or Old Testament was written as its own kind of book, independent of any knowledge of the New Testament, because that would mean that the New Testament was not even a thought in the mind of anybody when the Torah was being written. That's a trick. I'm identifying now, but I'm going to bring it out in later times, that the Torah was written just for the purpose of pulling off the New Testament, which means when the Torah was being written, based on what I'm finding out, when the Torah was being written, the New Testament was in mind. That's why it could be written so strongly be able to be used for the New Testament, to use it, to springboard off it. You know, I should look it up. Eventually, I should do that when I do that lesson. Because I found some scholar online, like I got the recording, but, you know, I can't remember the person's name. And he's saying, he's showing, and when I looked up the text, I'm like, oh my goodness. And he's showing that a certain verse, I can't remember even the verse, but he's saying, when you look at this, and then he pointed to the verse in Isaiah, he's saying, Paul was not quoting from the Old Testament, because Paul said that the Old Testament was written for our learning, for our understanding. And so we think that Paul and the others were quoting from the Old Testament when they put Old Testament verses in the New Testament. But he's saying, no, it's the other way around. And he proved it, and he showed that Paul was not quoting from the Old Testament, but the Old Testament prophet Isaiah was quoting from Paul. How is that possible? If the New Testament was not yet written, how could the prophet Isaiah quote from Paul? It's a big trick. One book to fool them all. Ye shall do my judgments and keep mine ordinances to walk therein. I am the Lord your God. But we find that these ordinances that they were doing and these rituals and so on were just like what was being done in Egypt and in the other nations around, in the other Canaanite nations. And I told you already in another lesson, that's why when they went into Canaan, the Moses said, don't follow their ways. But they broke down some of the altars, and then they kept some of the altars. Why could they keep them and use them? Because it was the same religious system. It was the same kind of sacrifices. So no need to break them all down. It's the same kind of stuff. And in the book of Judges, I already made the lesson and showed you that with Gideon, when they were breaking down the Baal altar, the God of Israel told him to then rebuild the altar with the same wood and supplies from the altar to Ashtoreth. If they are so unique, how can God of Israel himself tell him to rebuild it using the same wood, the same supplies, from the same altar that was dedicated unto Ashtoreth? He broke it down and rebuilt it to the same kind of altar he rebuilt, so that it could look like it's an Israelite altar when it was really an altar unto Ashtoreth. And he built it back with the same wood that was dedicated. You know how anti-Torah it would be to use the same kind of material to build back an altar that was already dedicated, when even New Testament is telling you don't even eat meat sacrificed unto idols, but he's going to use wood dedicated unto Ashtoreth to build the altar of the Lord. Are you kidding me? And then people of Israel just accepted it back there in the Bible times as if nothing is wrong with it. No, this is a big trick. And I found these things out only by trying to expose the New Testament. I was in shock when I realized that something is also wrong with the Old Testament as well. I was in shock. But because I'm not trying to be a deceptive teacher, trying to start no big group and run a church or a camp, then I am free to speak the truth as I find it. I am free to bring out the stuff. A lot of you are not free inside your heart, so you cannot speak the truth, because you have an agenda of deception. And how are you pulling it off? With one book to fool them all. Final scripture here now from Exodus chapter 8, verse 25 to 27. And Pharaoh called Moses and for Aaron. Called for Moses and for Aaron, because remember, Moses is like, come on, let us go. We got to go and worship our God and sacrifice him and so on. And said, go ye, sacrifice to your God in the land. So basically saying, stay right here. How could the Pharaoh say that if he knew the children of Israel were different? Because he knew they were not different. It is my personal belief that the children of Israel were Egyptians. They were just a group of Egyptians. They were using an Egyptian priesthood system with Egyptian rituals. So he could say, just, okay, go and do it in the land then. You're a part of us, but you're really trying to look separate. So there's no need for you to really go. Just do it right here in the land, because you're doing the same thing we're doing anyway. Your God isn't different from ours. Your system isn't different from ours. Your rituals are different from ours. Just do it right here in the land, as long as you can stay and be the slaves, according to how the Torah is putting it, that they were slaves. So it says, go and sacrifice to your God in the land. So basically, stay here, don't leave. And Moses said, it is not meet so to do, for we shall sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians. So Moses is letting you know, if you look at it keenly, that the sacrifices that Israel is about to do was the same as the Egyptians. So he said, we cannot sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians. Why? Because if Moses knew they were doing something else very different, like building a spaceship, he wouldn't have to compare it to make it seem the same, to make it seem similar, because building a spaceship is something completely different from offering a sacrifice. But because Moses knows it's the same kind of sacrifice that they're going to offer, he's saying, look, we're pretty much offering the same sacrifices, so we can't stay here, because y'all are going to be mad if we're trying to do it ourselves instead of going through the official land system here in Egypt. We're trying to look like we are our own autonomous system. And so then it's like we're showing disrespect to the system already set up. So the Egyptians will be like, what? You're trying to take over our culture? We're going to kill you. So Moses is like, no, we can't stay here. We'll die if we do it right here. So he's saying it's not meet for us to do this sacrifice, to sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians to the Lord our God. Lo, shall we sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians before their eyes, and will they not stone us? So he wants to go and sacrifice the abomination outside, so that at that time it does not seem in the eyes of the Egyptians as abominations, because the Egyptians proper will not be seeing it in their land, because the Israelites would have moved out to the outskirts of the other parts of the land, but not in Egypt proper. So as long as it's not being done right there in front of the very eyes of the Egyptians, then it's all right, because the Egyptians won't be there witnessing us doing it, so they won't stone us then. So let us go and do it. But we're doing the same thing. We're not building a spaceship to worship our God, to show with our technology that we're praising our God for giving us the capacity of mind to build a spaceship. We're not doing something different like that. We're doing the same abomination of animal sacrifice. And the Egyptians will stone us if we're copying it, because to take over the Egyptians' religious system will show that this is like a political move to take over. We're going to grow too strong, because everybody knows religion is used for power and domination on earth. So if we do this power structure kind of religious system right here in front of the Egyptians will be like, what? They're trying to take over with religion, with our own religion? They're going to usurp all our religion, usurp the Pharaoh from the throne and everything like that. Well, we have to rise up and kill them, Pharaoh. So it's like, no, we got to leave and do it when we're not right in front of their eyes. We will go 3 days' journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to the Lord our God as he shall command us. And Pharaoh said, go, so you can sacrifice in the wilderness. But listen, don't go too far and entreat from me. Why? Why don't go too far? Because this is the same Egyptian system. And entreat from me. Pharaoh is going to tell him, entreat from me. If they're that different, shouldn't Pharaoh know that you cannot entreat a God of Israel that's so different, with his own separate statutes and laws and ordinances and rituals? Because he will not pay attention to any requests like that from the Pharaoh, because the Pharaoh is heathen with a heathenistic system. That God will more say to Moses, tell him, before you can entreat for him on his behalf, tell him to clean up his ways and change his acts and change his religious system, because I don't deal with their heathen practices. Tell him to repent first before you can entreat for him. But Pharaoh can ask him to do that, because anywhere you go, Moses, you are doing the same rituals to the same kind of God. You are worshiping the god Hathor, the bull god Hathor. You're worshiping the bull god Baal. You're worshiping all the same kind of stuff you're doing. That's why, in closing, you can see all these different nations were doing the same kind of bull sacrifices or animal sacrifices of flesh. So anytime you traveled around and you moved around, like you're staying a year somewhere, you're sojourning somewhere, you can slip in and whatever, because they're all doing the same sacrificial system. That's why the priests, when you find a priest in this land or that land or this land or that land, they're doing the same slitting with the blood, draining out, because it's all the same sacrificial animal sacrificial system. It's just one book, people, to fool them all. Israel is doing nothing different from Egypt and from the other nations. So why did the God of Israel say that they are different and unique when they're really the same? Telling you people, one book to fool them all. You are no Hebrew Israelite. That is a big trick.